A while ago I decided to stream Genshin Impact. During that stream I gave out some opinions. Now as we all know, opinions on the internet are simply not allowed. So some people didn't quite like that stream. One thing people kept saying was that I didn't give the game a first shot, despite the fact that I had already played it for about 50 hours at that point. But I decided to play through most of the game to see if my opinions on it would change. And it did. At first I disliked Genshin Impact, and now I'm just disappointed by it. The main thing I would like to talk about is the gameplay, because it'll feed into the other opinions I have about the game. Now, I'm not going to mince words, I think the gameplay is boring, but the team building and the systems behind the gameplay are fantastic. I just don't like the execution of the combat. I find the elemental reaction system to be so amazing to the point where I think every game which has elements being used needs to have some variation of this system. Straight up, all developers need to pull a Tower Fantasy and copy this shit. It is amazing. RTS games need this, action games need this, hell, even Pokemon needs this system. It's such a simple system, but it has so much depth to it. At its core, it's just placing an element on an opponent and then you use something else to exploit that weakness you gave them. And the environment has an effect on the system as well. If I put an enemy in a puddle and then tase them, it does more damage. Or if I put grass on an opponent and then tase them, it somehow does more damage. Don't ask me for the science behind that shit. This system serves to make the game more realistic and gives you many options to build a team, as the different elements create different elemental reactions, which is something else I noticed. When I would look up a character to see what teams they are best in, I wouldn't see just one answer. It's rare to see a game with this level of synergy between the different characters you can get, which in turn made it fun for me to think about how different characters would benefit one another and work in a team. And after so much deliberation, I made my most optimal team. Now, I know it looks a little bit, kind of strange and a little weird, but trust, it's optimal. You also have different artifact sets that can change the role of the character within a team, but when I needed to actually fight an enemy in the game, I am incredibly bored. To best illustrate this fact, let me compare the combat in this game to others. In Devil May Cry, you need to do different button inputs to string together combos. In Genshin, I had to mash left click so much to the point where I was worried I'd break my mouse. I'd also switch it up by pressing E and Q, but I realized that there isn't a proper buffer for those buttons. So when I was mashing left click, I also mashed E and Q so they'd come out on time. Things like jump cancelling and dodge cancelling exist, but the game is so easy to the point where I never felt the need to interact with those systems. Now let's look at a game with simple inputs for attacks, like Elden Ring. Granted, it still has many different ways of attack when compared to Genshin, but you're able to get through the game by only attacking with R1, if you eat a lot of glue that is. That game's depth comes from its difficulty, you dodging enemies and figuring out the right times to punish them. In Genshin, I never felt like the enemies had any attack patterns that I cared to learn, except bosses. Now let's look at other action gacha games like Tower Fantasy and Genshin Impact. In those games, when you dodge you get benefits, which means you need to update your rotation on the fly. In Genshin, with the right stats, your rotation could remain the exact same. The only difference would be if you have your elemental burst up, but you could build a team that'll have that burst up when you need it in your rotation. So the reason why I don't like Genshin's combat is because attacking is equivalent to mashing, the enemies feel like they have no depth to them at all and they aren't intimidating, bar bosses, and the rotation can remain static with a few updates being made in it. When I had my current team formed, I started almost every encounter the same way and followed the same rotation. And when I get better relics, then I won't need to swap as much because the bursts will be up for when I need them. In some domains, I've had to change my team or timing of skills, but it never made the gameplay more interesting because of all the other flaws in the gameplay. The same can be said with the elemental reaction system. The most it's impacted me during combat, outside of my rotation, is minimal. The most it's done is make me not use some characters against enemies who are immune to a particular element. To me, that's a bad thing, but it's important to note this gameplay is what the developers want. They want a casual game, just look at the recent controversy. Because of course this was turned into a controversy. They said that another form of Spiral Abyss, the only endgame content, could cause anxiety for their players. That same design philosophy is shared with casual games, and to me Genshin's combat feels like it wants to be casual. There isn't anything wrong with that, but it doesn't work for me. However, I do like the boss fights. In those, I feel like the enemy I'm facing is more complex and I have more reason to focus and dodge. It's more engaging. Or there is some new element of gameplay I need to focus on. Granted, they're still really easy. In fact, every boss I fought I beat first try, with the exception of one because I had a different team layout than what I wanted. But when I changed my team, they were also easy. That was with underleveled weapons and artifacts. And I don't mean to say that as a flex, because it isn't one. I feel as though the developers didn't want the bosses to be difficult, which is why I think this is the experience 99% of players will have. In fact, in this gameplay, I doubt I'm playing as optimally as I can. It's just that easy. However, let's look at Spiral Abyss, the endgame in Genshin. Full disclaimer, I wasn't able to do much of it as I needed to grind to level up my off team. If I spent time doing that, then this review would have been released next month because the grind is insane. I didn't want to do that, so I stopped at floor 10, which may seem a little high based on what I just said. You see, I was at a bottleneck in Spiral Abyss, and I thought it would take a lot of time to grind out the right gear to overcome that bottleneck. But I had some spare time, so I grinded it out, got better artifacts, and then got to floor 10. The only reason I stopped was because my internet beat me. After getting to floor 10, I decided to rewrite this section, but everything I wrote about Spiral Abyss was correct. There aren't any new challenges introduced, you just need the stats to beat it. The enemies don't become more complex, nor is there anything else added to enhance the difficulty, except for a timer, which only serves to have a DPS check. And that's all. Maybe floor 11 and 12 are a spike in difficulty, but floor 10 and below are just challenges in which you need bigger numbers, instead of becoming a better player. I only had one level 80 character, everyone else was level 70, and I even had 2 level 50s in my squad. Even with that, it wasn't challenging, and when I hit the next wall, all I need to do is grind some more, then I'm done. Then I beat the game. There isn't anything else left for me to do in it, in terms of combat. When it resets, I'll have some more things to fight, but the enemy formations are things I've already seen before. One of the formations was taken from a domain I was farming. When I beat Spiral Abyss, the overworld has nothing for me. The grind will be the same old artifact farming, which is atrocious. It's so damn boring. I'm not surprised the Genshin community is so toxic. If I had to do this shit daily, then I'd hate humanity as well. I can't even blame them, hell, I sympathize with them. There isn't even an auto for domain clears, and the daily commissions are annoying to do. They take way too long. The game is casual, but the day-to-day grind feels more involved than any other gacha game I've played. From casual games, I'd expect something like an auto or sweep function, but that isn't present at all in this game. So every day I play, I need to spend 30 or so minutes of my time just to finish the dailies. Other games I could have running in the background on auto as I watch gay porn. As I scroll through Reddit, which honestly sounds even worse. And when I'm done grinding, the reward is killing that same group of enemies in 6 seconds as opposed to 8 seconds. It feels like such an annoying grind with a minimal reward at the end of it. Moving on from that, I want to talk about the exploration of the game. It's the best exploration I've seen in any open world game, ever. The amount of depth which exists to the areas you explore is amazing. I once saw a destroyed ship and decided to go through it, which in turn led to many different puzzles and it even connected to a cave. Also, the puzzles rarely felt repetitive. They still operated under similar rules like using the correct element on a pedestal, but there was enough difference to where the puzzles were interesting. However, getting to them was boring. The movement in this game is drier than beef jerky in the Sahara Desert. It's dry to the point where you could use the movement to save someone from drowning. To my knowledge, the only important movement tech is bunny hopping. There is edge boosting and dash jumping, but those seem really situational. Now it has been getting better with new regions. Inazuma introduced a quick method of movement and boats, so I think in the future they can improve on the movement, but as of now, it's really boring to go through the world, which is unfortunate because I think the world in this game is amazing. It does what most games fail to do. It makes the location not only look different, but feel different. This is done because of the amazing world building in the game. When I go through Mondstadt, it has a different feel than Inazuma. The scenery has changed, the characters along with their drip, and also just the general culture of the area feels different. It doesn't feel like different set pieces string together, it feels like different areas making up a world. And this is possible because the world building is so good. Now, for how well written I think the main story is, I'd say the story is okay, but the characters are better written. Except for Sumeru, but I'll get to that in a bit. For example, in Inazuma, I didn't care about the vision hunt decree at all. I was only interested in how Raiden views eternity, and why she was being a prick. The game tried to showcase emotional moments related to the decree, but I didn't give a shit at all. The story was talking about how someone's life got ruined, but I just met that character 5 minutes ago, so why would I be emotionally invested in them? The same could be said about character deaths. The story will be quick to kill off a character and expect you to care about them, but I never did. At times, I'd even say the story felt rushed. Things happened way too quickly. The story quests were able to expand on characters more, and I think that's where the best writing is. But the Archon quests felt like they needed to rush through the story. However, Sumeru has been different so far. It isn't finished yet, but the story within it has been considerably more interesting. It also made the protagonist less annoying. At first, Aether is an actual moron, but in Sumeru, he actually thinks. For the first time in 2 years, his neurons had to work, and it somehow found a way to make Paimon likable. I'm still put off by her soulless eyes, but she isn't as annoying as I once thought she was. Granted, she still has one problem. In the story, during multiple character deaths, she won't shut the hell up. A character could be experiencing ultimate despair, and then Paimon will be 2 feet away from them waffling on about how bad they must be feeling. If I had somebody important to me just die, and this floating midget wouldn't shut the hell up, then I swear I'd lose my mind. Some characters in this game have a monk level of patience to deal with Paimon. That aside, another plotline I've been interested in is the overarching plotline. I don't wish to go into specifics because of spoilers, but those stories have been nice to read. They don't feel rushed, but the prior stories weren't anywhere near as good. Hopefully in the future this quality of writing for the Archon quest can stay, but there aren't any guarantees. In the cutscenes, the animation is really good. They easily convey the emotions of the characters. Also, some side quests are really well written, and you could actually change the world after doing them, so they don't feel like throwaways. However, I've noticed some weird shit during the cutscenes, like the lighting suddenly changing or the audio briefly cutting out. However, the worst has been the lip syncing. I've played the game in both Japanese and English, but the lip syncing was never good. I think it only works in the Chinese language, but that's literally the shit you would expect from a game in 2001. With how much this game makes, they could afford better lip syncing. Speaking of how much they make, let's talk about the monetization. It's something I warmed up to a bit, until I found out about the costumes. Before that, I want to talk about how much they give to the player base. It's pathetic, just straight up. They give the absolute bare minimum they can to those that play the game, despite the fact that the game makes millions. On the second anniversary, they gave out a 20 roll and an event where you could get more primos, and that's it. The game has been making millions for 2 years, yet you give your players less than a third of what it takes to reach soft pity. I don't count the event as that would have been released regardless of there being an anniversary. But looking at the gacha, I've lightened up on it. In the past, I thought the constellations were needed, but now that I know how easy the game is, they really aren't. The same goes with the weapon banner. Also, it's really rare to see power creeping in the game. There are examples of it, but it seems like more characters get better with time as opposed to being power crept. And 4-star characters aren't worthless. They're actually pretty good. But a 0.6% rate with a pity starting at 75 is still atrocious. And the fact that the standard banner has had 2 changes over 2 years is really stupid. Having almost every 5-star being limited is possibly the most FOMO-fueled gacha mechanic I've seen in a while. However, the worst thing is the skins. I can't believe they are charging more than $40 for the deluxe skin. It looks swanky, but costs more than half the price of a new AAA game. I feel like Genshin has some sort of pay pig situation going on with its fans. That's the only way I could figure out how people can spend so much on this game when it feels like they blatantly view the players as walking wallets. I know it's a business that needs to make money, but other, much smaller, gacha games are way more generous and still turn a huge profit. And it's not like MiHoYo is struggling to make ends meet. They literally invested $65 million into a nuclear reactor. I ain't got a damn clue as to why they did that, but they surely make enough money to give more to the people that grant them those millions. In terms of performance though, the game doesn't really have many bugs. Any bug I've encountered has been fixed by me simply re-logging into the game. But I did experience one crash and some occasional frame drops in the game. But it was infrequent enough to the point where it's not really a problem, except if you plan to play this game on your phone. If you plan to do that, then a salute to you, cause that phone is gonna explode. And the music is amazing. I'm someone who prefers vocal tracks over instrumental ones, but the instrumental tracks in this game slap. That shit is goated with the sauce. Also, I can't really comment on events as a whole, as I haven't experienced many, but the Of Ballads and Brews event was really enjoyable. It had different things for you to do in it as opposed to you doing the stuff you've already done a million times. I mean, you literally got to manage a shop. I honestly wouldn't have expected that to be done in a game like this. However, I'd say after playing the game for 200 hours, I've just become disappointed in it. The elemental system and team building is amazing, but the combat's boring and there's no endgame. The world building is wonderful, but going through the world is terrible. And the characters are great, but the story feels rushed. Sumeru has been good so far, but it is yet to be finished, so I can't say for certain it'll wrap up in a satisfying way. There are many elements I like about Genshin, but for everything I like, a huge asterisk is placed next to it. I want to like it, but the flaws of the game prevent me from wanting to play it daily, especially the lack of an auto for domains and commissions, which is why I think Genshin Impact is a 7.5 out of 10. For me, the game doesn't work, but I can see the appeal of it. Genshin seems like the type of game I'll log into whenever a large update happens, but I doubt I'll be a frequent player at all.